If you've tried publishing your paper before and it has been rejected or it has come back with reviewers' comments, sometimes you've probably wondered to yourself, what on earth are the reviewers thinking? What do they want me to do? Sometimes these comments can be contradictory. Sometimes you just kind of think, did they even read my paper? Maybe you've been in a situation when, you submitted a paper and it came back from the editor a couple of weeks later just saying like, look, we don't want your paper, we're not interested in it. So you might have been wondering as a PhD student or a researcher, what are reviewers and editors in journals actually thinking? Can I get into their head and find out exactly what they want from me? Because at the end of the day, if you know what the reviewers and editors want from you in your paper, then you can dramatically increase your chances of getting published in top Scopus-Indexed journals. You get an unfair advantage over everybody else that is trying to publish because you know what the reviewer and the editor want from your paper. And I want to give you this unfair advantage in this video. This is an exclusive recording of a live masterclass that we did at Research Paper Mastery with Professor Bedrettin Yazan, who's an editor and a journal reviewer, and he told our clients at Research Paper Mastery exactly, step by step, what editors and reviewers such as himself who review papers for Scopus-Indexed journals really want to see in a paper. So this is an exclusive opportunity for you to get inside a reviewer's head and understand how they are thinking about a paper that is submitted to a journal. So without further ado, let's dive right in and let's see what reviewers really want from you in a paper.
So first of all, like to define who editors are and who reviewers are. Editors are usually experienced scholars who know the field really well, and they have professional connections to recruit associate editors and reviewers. It's, most of times reviewers are also board members, the editorial board members, but the issue is that editorial board members are never enough. So they always go beyond the editorial board members to recruit more reviewers when they're starting the peer review process, right? For TESOL Journal, we have a lot of editorial board members and they're committed to reviewing at least 4 to 5 papers per year, but we always ask them to do more because we receive a lot of, submissions in the last year. So associate editor, it varies from journal to journal, but they are always experienced scholars, and then they might be editorial or former editorial board members of the journal, and they are also themselves authors who publish in the journal or other journals as well. But one thing that we need to remember here, these are all human beings, right? They all like yourselves, right? To humanize the process that they are not at least before artificial intelligence takes over, they're still human beings and they are like yourselves, and like you could be the journal editor, right? So here in this room we might have some future journal editors in a few years or in I don't know how many years. But what I'm highlighting is that don't believe that they are people who never make any mistakes, right? They do make a lot of mistakes, believe me. So reviewers, they're experts in the topic. Obviously, the editors try to find the best reviewers to review your paper, to help you improve your paper, understand how it should be improved. Again, from the editor's perspective, at least for myself, like I always try to help the authors improve their paper. Even if the decision is reject, I would love to provide substantive feedback to help the authors. And most of the reviewers do the same thing. Some of them are, less helpful than others, but it happens. It's human nature. Some are better than others. And they usually expert reviewers, they have published in the journal or similar journals on the topic. When I go to the system, when there's a new submission, the system recommends reviewers, right? And sometimes I select from those. It's a database where they match the people who have already published on the topic and the topic of the submission. So they around 30 people they suggest me to pick from. I sometimes pick someone or two people from there, or go and assign others beyond that list of potential reviewers, because sometimes they suggest 30 people, but some of them already are doing reviews for the journal. Some of them are like really busy, obviously, and most of the times when I select like 3 reviewers for an article, I go with one person who is like probably busy, but also like an expert in the field. Sometimes it's it's difficult to convince them to review because people are busy, they don't have the time, and they probably have other journals to review too. So especially in the last couple of years, it's become, with COVID too, it's become really difficult to find good reviewers. But still, colleagues and people who are publishing in the journal, they're helping us review and keep the process going. And there are a lot of reviewer two situations which I try to avoid. So I have the ability as the editor to rescind the review if the review is too harsh, or it's off the topic, or it's just focusing on the person rather than the paper. I can cancel their review, and editors have that power, to my knowledge. So again, the filter of the editor is important. And whenever you receive reviewer 2 commentary, like meaning that really harsh, or a reviewer who always sees the problems, nothing positive about the paper, I would suggest you don't take it personally, right? Think about it as as one negative experience you had. But again, it happens to all of us. It happens to it happened to me a few times. It happened to me like last summer. It was a very harsh review. It's part of it. Just ignore. I mean, I think after a while you develop that thick skin, and then you say, okay, this is one person who is probably like me, talking about my paper somewhere else. You take whatever you see is relevant to your paper, and then the rest you can easily ignore, and then like imagine that person never was in your life. I mean, they are not, fortunately. And again, remember, these are all human beings, and you guys are going to become, you probably are reviewers for journals already, and you are going to become reviewers for journals in the near future. So it's us, right? So I think when people talk about academia and review process and everything, I suggest, so become reviewers, right? So let's fix the process together. Or become editorial board members. Do something to contribute to the improvement of the process, because like whatever is going on, it's not external to us. It's us as authors and reviewers and editors and editorial board members who are supposed to be working towards enhancing the peer review process. Who are editors and reviewers now? What are they looking for? But before that, I wanted to make a distinction between 2 things, right? So study and the paper. So this is one, again, I try to explain this to all the authors and my colleagues here in the PhD program and whoever I work with. When you look at a publication, there are 2 things there. There's a study which was already conducted, right? And there isn't much to do about it, right? So if you have conducted the study, and if you have followed the procedures and everything, like, creating your research question and then doing the literature review to find who has done the work on the topic similarly and differently, and then you devise your data collection methods, and then you conduct your data collection methods, you collect the data from a certain group of participants. It's a long process, right? Especially when you're writing an empirical paper, which is one of the most common types of papers that you would be working on. The study is a whole big process that happens before you write the paper, right? Paper is the report of the study. So when good reviewers, when they look at a publication or when they look at a submission for a potential publication, they can see the study part of it and the paper part of it separately, right? And as a reviewer, when I see the study and I understand the study has no issues, I am confident that the paper can be fixed, right? Can be corrected and can be put in a better shape to report on the study. But if there are problems with the study, then it becomes really problematic to write the paper on it, and then for the paper to be published. So my suggestion to begin with, make sure that you follow all the procedures methodologically in your study to make sure that you have a very robust and strong study. Then writing the paper is going to be really easy. So you are publishing the study, not only the paper, right? So you are contributing to the literature, research literature with your study. The paper, again, what is being published is the report on the study. I think that distinction made sense to me when I started reviewing, and now I just wanted to share with you guys and most of the reviewers. When they provide constructive feedback, that is, that's the one that I experienced too in the future, in the past, when I received, I still receive a lot of, reviewer commentary on my own publications too. But like it's you can tell how reviewers can see the methodology of the study and the paper differently. So keep that in mind, please. And then, so what are they looking for? And so to begin with, as I said earlier, they are not consistent. All the pieces of advice or some suggestions I'm going to share with you, they are all like based on my experience. Some other editor or the reviewer might provide slightly different, but again, this is most of the time these are going to be the suggestions you would hear. But again, like I may be missing a few, which, if you guys ask questions, which I can remember, and then share more. So first of all, the study part of it, right? The part that you are working on before you get to write the report. So make sure that your research methodology is robust, right? Familiarize yourself. Like if you're a PhD student, or if you are already a PhD, like you can always go back to your research methodology textbooks, right? Like qualitative research, quantitative research, when you are designing the study, when you are conducting the data collection and analysis, and then everything, like that part is whole separate process from writing the paper, right? Make sure that your study is robust and following all the suggestions in the research methodology, right? And then when you complete the study, when you have the data analysis and the codes and the themes, believe me, it's going to be so easy to write the paper. So that's my initial suggestion. Like look at your study design, research questions, and always ask, your professors, Marek, and like, you can ask me too, right? Email me if you want advice on your research methodology, especially if it is qualitative research. I'd be happy to help. And then like which context you are working and which participants you are working with, in the setting and the data sources. And think about, like, whenever you make decisions about data sources, what data sources you are collecting or you are using, and why are you using them. The why part is usually the part that's missing, right? The colleagues that I work with, they miss connecting the why part to their research questions, right? So again, in a like a lesson plan, right? In the lesson plan, all objectives, everything relies on the objectives, right? In a research study, everything relies on research questions, right? Your data sources, whatever data sources decisions you make, you got to make sure that you justify those decisions based on your research questions. Same with your data analysis, right? So you describe the data analysis procedures, but why did you do what did you do, right? Or why did you do what you did in your data analysis to justify your data analysis procedures based on your research questions. And in a lot of cases, what I'm hoping to see in a paper, and this is the study part, which is going to help you write the paper, like consider sharing some of the example codes from your study to show the reader what really happened in the kitchen before you expect the reader to dig in the meal you prepared, right? So that's one of the analogies that I really like, because especially in qualitative research and quantitative research too, what we share in the paper is the output, right? The reader doesn't see and know much about what really happened in the study part. I mean, they know through the author's explanations and descriptions, but trustworthiness, credibility, transferability, transparency, all those concepts, when you think about it from a qualitative research perspective, the reader expects the author to share more, to tell them, hey, what really happened in the kitchen? What did you do? You're serving us this meal and you're expecting us to eat it, like it, but tell us about it, right? So what did you do in the kitchen to prepare it, so we know about the meal before we get to eat? Again, this is an analogy only, but it's always useful to explain the need to provide some more details about the research methodology. And also, like, especially if it's a researcher, if it's a qualitative research, I suggest a researcher positionality that connects researcher as a human being, as a subjective human being, their positionality, like their relationship to the research topic, their relationship to the participants, their relationship to the context, their relationship to the setting, right? That relationship is important for the reader to understand and interpret the author's interpretation of the data, right? So again, very much qualitative, like interpretivist or post-structuralist perspective, but keep that in mind if you're writing a qualitative research, including a researcher positionality or researcher subjectivity statement, that would help the reader. And also interpretation of the data, how you interpret it, is also the what happens before you get to start writing the paper, right? So the paper part, when you start writing the paper, a couple of things that I'm just giving some suggestions here, and then I'm going to give more suggestions later on. So following the same process in the methodology, make sure you justify in the introduction of your paper, right, why your study brings anything new to the current understanding of the topic or the phenomenon of interest you have, right? In the very beginning, because reviewers sometimes they don't have the time, but they want to see, editors too, they want to see at the beginning of your paper, in the introduction, what is it that's new for this paper, about the topic. And then they need to be convinced that this paper or the study has the potential to be published. Your study, talk about it in introduction, put it in the context, and tell your reader why this is an important study and it is bringing something new to our current understanding of phenomenon of interest. And then situate the study within the larger literature, which you should have done or you would have done already, right? So in the past, when you are designing your study, you would do a literature review. And then when you are writing the paper, you write that review down in your paper, right? And you situate your paper, or your study in relation to the recent studies or other studies that have been recently published that on which, right, your study is building, right? And how your study is going to be extending the similar studies from the recent literature. And recency is something that I'm always paying attention to as an editor, because, again, let's say you receive a manuscript and then you look at the references only. Go to references section and look at the references section only. And then if the most recent paper is from 2010, I think it's a question mark to begin with. It tells you that the author has not looked at the recent literature, when they are designing their study and then when they are writing the paper, right? It's a big red flag for me. So whenever you write your paper, especially whenever you actually design the study, you review the recent literature, and whenever you write the paper, you incorporate that literature into your paper, because the journals are supposed to publish the most recent research, right? So they don't want to repeat similar studies. They want to write something new, and that newness comes from the recency, and the study should be able to show how it is contributing to the most recent literature. And the other thing that I'm going to talk later about, make sure that your study is getting in this conversation with the recent articles in the journal. That's also really important. If you are looking for a journal You need to know what's going on, what kind of conversation is going on in the journal already, and how can you contribute to that conversation. Anyways, I'll talk more about that in a minute. So a couple of other suggestions here. When you are describing your methodology, or even before your methodology, talking about your theoretical conceptual framework, make sure that you describe it really clearly, and then describe your methodological procedures in detail. Again, tell your reader what really happened in the study part of the process, and then like what you are doing in the paper part. And then make sure that your findings and results are directly answering your research questions. Again, this is another really easy way of looking at a paper and understanding like their methodology and the study, right? So look at the research questions, usually at the top of the paper, right? And sometimes repeated in the methodology too. And then look at the findings, what they call findings. If they are not matching, right? If the findings, or if what they call findings and results are not directly answering the research questions, it's again a big red flag. So that, direct relationship is supposed to be there, guys. And then one last thing, usually the discussion part of the paper, make sure you tie everything back to your research questions to demonstrate the contribution of your study. Like, how is your study contributing something new to the current understanding of whatever it is that you are studying.
If you're interested in being part of this thriving community of other PhD students and researchers who are publishing in really good journals, then book a free one-to-one consultation, and our expert advisors will discuss with you what your challenges are, what your goals are, to see if research paper mastery might be a good fit for you. And the link to do that is right below this video.
So a couple of suggestions from me as an author who made a lot of mistakes, again, who received a lot of rejects, and then me as a reviewer who is always committed to providing constructive feedback, even if the decision is reject, and me as an editor who's doing, his best to coordinate a review process in most humanizing ways possible. So these are, this is my positionality, right? Here are my suggestions, right? So first of all, so some of those you might have already heard from Marek or other colleagues, but find the journal before you start writing the paper. This is really important to make sure that the editors and the reviewers know that the journal, the current conversation that's going on in the journal, and you read the journal, because that's the idea, right? So we are following those journals, we are browsing their recent articles, and because we as researchers, we want to be up to date, right? So I wouldn't want to submit an article to a journal that I haven't browsed, because it would be completely blind submission, in the sense that I wouldn't know what's going on in the journal, and I wouldn't know how my paper is going to be making a contribution to the journal. So take your time, please. That part of the process, do not rush. Find the best journal that you believe your paper is gonna fit. That fit is really, really important, guys. And then if you, when you find a few, perhaps just keep 2 or 3 of them as a, I'm going to tell you in a minute, as a plan B. But the journal that you found, browse it, look at the, recent papers and read about it. I'm going to talk about it in a minute, read about the editorial board members, the, author guidelines and everything. But the idea is, please do not write the paper and then go looking for a journal. Find the journal before you start writing your paper, and then when you write the paper, you're going to have the journal in your mind, right? So you are writing this paper for a specific journal. So you're not writing the paper for all the journals, because journals have their own scopes of interest. They have their own specific expertise or topics that they focus on. Anyways, moving forward, always have a plan B journal, right? As you prepare, again, you should do that before you start writing your paper, right? Have your plan A journal, which is your first target journal, and at the same time, make sure you have a plan B journal, right? Both journals, make sure you have browsed their last 2 or 3 issues, and then you are ready in case you get a reject, in case you want to change your journal after the first round or the second round, hopefully not. but like something happens, you always have a plan B. You don't waste your time later on in the process, because the best way to recover from a reject is to submit your paper to another journal. And when you have that journal ready as a plan B, then you're not going to waste any time, right? So you have your plan A, you submit it there. Unfortunately, it's rejected, and then, okay, it's fine, totally. And then take all the commentary and the feedback and then incorporate that feedback and then go with the plan B journal. And then when you find the journal, target journal, plan A and the plan B journal, please make sure that you browse their last few issues, right? At least last 2 years, make sure that you have written everything. That's one way of looking at it. The other way would be, let's say, you are studying a certain topic, and then look up that topic in the journal. If the journal has not published about that topic before, on one hand, it is risky because the editor is not going to believe it is in the scope of the journal, and editor is going to have a lot of challenges to find reviewers for that specific submission, right? So it is good to have a few articles that have been published on the topic in that specific journal, so that there is a conversation going on there in that target journal to which your study would be contributing. So keep that in mind. Let's say there's an X journal and I go there and I look up, they never published anything that I would be writing about, then that is not the target journal for you, right? Just scratch it, go to the next journal. So the other thing, again, this is something that you would already do, but I would suggest very strongly that you guys read the author guidelines very carefully. Sometimes there are inconsistencies. That's okay. Email the editors, email the editorial assistants, but ask them to make sure that you are following the author guidelines of the journal in order not to waste any more time in the process. So yeah, please make sure that you read the author guidelines very carefully. So I was gonna share my experience with you guys from this journal. For example, Recall journal, review of Call, originated in, I think, somewhere in Ireland. It's a European-based journal, and they have in their author guidelines this requirement or a recommendation that whatever submission you make to the journal, they cite relevant articles from the quote-unquote sister journals, right? So if you are submitting something to Recall, you gotta cite papers from Call and Calico, and what is the other one? Like Journal of Language Learning and Technology, right? So Recall has that requirement in the author guidelines, and they expect you to cite the relevant articles from those similarly orientated journals, which is great actually, to help the authors to find out about those journals, because they may not know about those journals, and also it helps the journal's impact factor, right? So one more thing, one more suggestion here. After you read the author guidelines, please always feel free to email editors. Some of them may not be as responsive. I always respond, and our editorial assistant, they respond too. So please remember that it is an option for you to email the editor with your questions about the author guidelines or anything about the journal. For example, like when we took over the journal, there was some inconsistency in our word count. Now we just explain that or clarify that in our author guidelines. And then look up the people in the editorial board. And usually, like, I think this is the idea. Do you want the people in the editorial board, not all of them, but some of them, right, who might be reviewers for your paper? Do you expect them, or do you want them to read your paper, right? Is that the crowd that you want to talk to? It may not be, right? So like in some situations, you're going to see the scholars on the editorial board whose work is not interesting to you, right? So you may not want to submit to their journal because they have a whole different orientation to research. They are talking about different things, or differently from you would, right? So look up the people on the editorial board and see if that crowd is your crowd. So one other thing that I found really useful in my own publications, and also I make the same suggestion to my colleagues here in the PhD program, find a mentor text published in that specific journal recently, because having a mentor text like this is going to be so helpful for you to understand the expectations of the journal, right? So this text or this paper and this study has recently been published in the journal. So if you make your paper, and considering that your study is already robust, if you do that following that mentor text, it's very likely that your paper is going to be taken positively, right? So that's always a good idea, to go find a mentor text, a recently published article in that journal, similar topic perhaps, and similar methodology perhaps, right? And see how that author or those authors wrote it, and then see how you can emulate their style or the way they organize the paper, right? Because even that might be an issue in some cases, like the way paper is organized. We have a certain academic journal article outline, right, which is more or less consistent across the board, across journals. But you may want to see one that has already been approved by the editors and the reviewers of the journal. And the next thing that I would suggest you guys should do is, again, I talked about this earlier a little bit, make sure that you situate your study within the recent research literature. It's easy, but also like it's easily visible in your paper if you haven't done it. When you've done it as well, it's like when you look at the literature review of the paper, submission, and when you look at the references, if they are not citing anything from the last 5-10 years, it's a red flag, right? And then I ask myself as an editor, so one way of fixing it would be asking the authors to add that literature to their literature review. But then the problem is, if they haven't reviewed the recent literature when they are designing the study, right, the study part of the process, if they haven't done that when they are doing the study, doing it right now is not going to help much. So again, it's a big red flag. I have witnessed that studies like that, or the manuscripts like that, they didn't go through the process successfully. And recently I started desk rejecting those studies or those submissions, because it's really waste of, I don't want to waste reviewers' time. Again, as I said earlier, reviewers are really rare to find. Good reviewers are really rare to find these days. So I want to make sure that in my own desk review, when I look at the papers to begin with, I want to make sure that the paper is in a good shape before I send it out to the external review. One more thing, as I said earlier, make sure you are familiar with the recent conversation that's going on in the journal, right? You know your topic, and look at the journal, who has recently published on that topic in the journal. Make sure that you bring their work into your study, and then into your paper, into your report, and then you make sure that you are citing the journal in your own submission. It's going to help the journal impact factor. It's going to help the editor find reviewers. It's going to help the editor understand how your paper is contributing to the current conversation in the journal. It's really, really, really important, guys. And I usually imagine that situation as a big, like, actual conversation, right? So I'm not sure if you've ever seen a huge, conference hall where there are round tables, right? I imagine journals as big conference room with smaller round tables on which people are having a conversation, as we speak, right? So you, as a person who wants to publish your work, your study in that journal, you enter that big hall, you see a lot of round tables. They have their flags, or telling what topic they're talking about. You approaching one of those round tables is what's happening when you submit your article to a journal. You approach that round table and you listen first, right? What kind of conversation is going on at that table? Because you believe that table might be the table where you also sit and then talk about your own study, right? You make a contribution to that table. So when you approach and listen to the conversation, and then learn from the conversation, and you include that conversation into your own study, the people at the table, they will say, oh, okay, come over here. So your work is also valuable to us. Tell us about your work. is what's going to happen when you have a paper that's accepted to be on at the table, right? So that kind of analogy could also help. Look at it as a conversation, and multiple conversations going on in the journal, in a big hall, round tables, in a big hall, you entering the room, looking around, finding the round table. If there are no round tables, if there are no, again, as I said earlier, if there are no round tables which are discussing your own topic, then you may not want to be in that hall, right? Just leave, go find another big hall, another journal where you know there are people who are discussing the topic that you're interested in. And then this is another writing suggestion I see a lot. Most of the time, I recognize the inconsistency when people write their paper. They start with the word like the study did this, and then they move to the voice of like I did it or we did it, right? Again, it's easy fix. I would suggest you be consistent, pick one and use it. If there are multiple authors, use we all the time. If there's one author, use I all the time, across the paper. I know some journals, again, usually quantitative papers, they tend to use more distanced language. But again, I am totally fine with the use of I or we. Or if you want to be consistent, on the other hand, use this study did this, this study was like that, this study was conducted across the board, right? If that's the way you want to go with that, but be consistent in either case you pick, right? And again, if you are writing a qualitative research paper, I would suggest we or I. And also I would suggest, related to this, I would suggest you guys use active voice all the time, because passive voice creates a distance between the author and the study, and the author and the reader. So it's usually again, it's not a big red flag, it's easy to fix, but that's the other suggestion I give to my my colleagues here and the authors that I work with. Use one specific voice consistently and use active voice and avoid passive voice, as long as you know the subject. Right? And then the other writing suggestion, which really helps, or is helped me personally when I was just publishing my work, do not cite anyone at the beginning of your paragraph, right? Every paragraph, make sure that the first sentence is yours, completely yours. That's your topic sentence. Don't say Yazan 2020 argued. Don't, please, right? Put in your sentence, right? And tell us, the reader, right, what your paragraph is going to be about. Very simple, one short sentence that's going to give, the topic of the paragraph. But make sure that it is yours. Make sure that you are not direct quoting or citing anybody in the first sentence, because it takes your voice away. Keep your voice foregrounded. And speaking of that, two more things I would suggest. Please, do not provide long direct quotes from other people's papers unless there is no other way to say it, right? I always suggest paraphrase it. If it's not possible to paraphrase, maybe, but most of the time it is possible to paraphrase anyone's work, right? The reason why I suggest this is because when you include a huge chunk of long quotation from somebody else's paper, then again, you are losing your voice, right? You are including somebody else's voice into your paper. You want to keep your voice foregrounded as an author in the paper. So paraphrase their work, paraphrase their sentences, right? Any sentence, any direct quote is possible to paraphrase, unless you are quoting, I don't know, Marx or Heidegger or I don't know, Hegel. Right? So if that's the case, maybe, or if somebody says something in such nice way and there is something about the paper, about the paragraph or about the sentence that you need to include, okay, but very rarely. The other thing about the voice that also is something that I worked on a lot as I was writing my dissertation. My mentor and my advisor told me a lot about this. Make sure that your sentences are not too lengthy, like 2 lines in a Word document. Don't go over that, right? Keep your sentences simple. You are not trying to, as an author, please let the reader have a breather. Don't exhaust them. because long sentences are exhausting to me. Like as I just, with a lot of relative clauses and everything, it goes and on and on. It just, it never stops. So I would suggest shorter sentences. I would suggest succinct sentences. They are really helpful from a reader's perspective. And this is, I believe this is one of the last suggestions I have. One thing that also is a red flag, sometimes I send such papers out for review, sometimes I don't, because sometimes it's not easy to fix, right? So qualitative research papers, people include excerpts from the participants in their findings, right? So usually how it goes, or how it should go, is there is a finding statement, and then the author provides an illustrative quotation from the participants, and then the author is supposed to provide an interpretation of that quotation, right, in relation to the research questions. But what usually happens, that I have seen in the recent submissions that we received for TESOL Journal, there is some sort of an explanation, like a finding statement or some argument, and there is a direct quote coming from the participant, and there is no interpretation of that direct quote in relation to the research question. That is also a red flag that sometimes I work with the authors to improve that part. Sometimes it's a lot. It's really not easy to work with the author to have them. In the past, I've given them a lot of opportunities to revise. In some cases, I returned the paper in the first round and asked them, why don't you include some interpretation for the direct codes? Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. It's just, again, I try to mentor authors a lot in that sense, but again, it's up to the author to make a decision whether or not they want to include that part of their paper. But again, in the findings, in a qualitative research paper, my expectation is start with a finding statement, or whatever argument you have to support your research question, or to support your answer to the research question. Then provide an excerpt or a direct quote from the participants, but do not move forward without explaining that excerpt, without explaining that quotation in relation to your findings and your research questions. And I believe, okay, one more thing here. Again, this is the last section of the paper, usually in the discussion part. Make sure that you tie everything back to your research questions, and make sure that you show how your study is contributing to the recent literature, which is easy if you do the literature review really well, right? So writing the discussion is the easiest job if you have a really good literature review, right? And in collaborative work that I have been part of, so sometimes people have this division of labor. Oh yeah, you write a literature review, I'm going to write the discussion section. But the successful collaborations that I've had in the past included me writing the literature review and also writing the discussion. Because if I wrote the literature review, writing the discussion becomes so easy for me, right? Such an easy work to connect the findings to the literature in your discussion, and to show, not just tell, but to show how your research findings are making this contribution to the recent understanding of whatever topic you're researching, right? Okay, yeah, a couple of things I believe I put here as suggestions. Make sure that the way you use your theoretical framework is explicit to your reader, especially in your data analysis. How did you use your theoretical framework or conceptual framework when you're approaching your data? That's, again, part of the study, but also in your paper report, you want to talk about that, again, showing what happened in the kitchen, right? And then I talked about this a little bit when I was discussing the discussion section. Make sure that your study's contribution is explicit, right? Do not just say, oh, this is another study, I don't know, experts in 2019 did this, and they found this, and then in our study, similarly or differently, we found that. That kind of comparison is just very surface level. Just go deeper and then show, perhaps bring examples from your participants' experiences, bring examples from your findings to show your contribution, not just tell that there was some contribution. That's another very common mistake a lot of authors make. I make too. I did, I did make a lot of mistakes in the past in that sense. Like just saying and telling that my study is making a contribution is not enough. I gotta show with evidence from my findings how my study is something that's making a new contribution to the research literature. And thank you so much, guys. I wanted to give you guys some time to ask questions. That's why I was a little fast in the last couple of slides, but I'm more than happy to explain further if you have any questions.
Yeah, this was fantastic. Thank you very much, Bedrettin. And there was a lot of engagement in the chat. And a lot of questions in the chat. So we could perhaps go over those if that's okay.
Absolutely.
With you.
Yeah.
Heather asked an interesting question that do you pay reviewers? Not you personally, but as editors, do reviewers get paid?
Sadly, no. It's a publisher issue. Publishers don't have. So what they usually do, I don't think our publisher does that, but I've had other publishers that I reviewed for. They give you a subscription to their journals, like 1 month subscription to all. Let's say Elsevier, right? Let's say you did a review for linguistics and education. After that, Elsevier gives you 1 month access to all their journals. Same with Routledge or Francis and Taylor and Francis. When you finish your review, they tell you, okay, you got free access to all our journals for a month. That's how they quote unquote pay, but not a real payment. And there are journals actually, which I'm avoiding personally. The journals who are charging the authors to publish their work, open access. If you review or if you edit something for those journals, they have a discount for let's say I reviewed an article for a journal, Education Sciences, which is charging people. Then next time I want to publish with them, they give me a discount for the publication fees. That's how they try to pay. But no, again, it's a big problem in the field that reviewers are not paid. That's why it's really difficult to find good reviewers.
That makes sense.
If you're interested in being part of this thriving community of other PhD students and researchers who are publishing in really good journals, then book a free one-to-one consultation, and our expert advisors will discuss with you what your challenges are, what your goals are, to see if research paper mastery might be a good fit for you. And the link to do that is right below this video.
We've got 2 questions from Nicole here. What do you think about authors recommending reviewers in the cover letter? And then what are your suggestions for the cover letter? What are your recommendations for writing the cover letter?
Some journals actually have that in place to ask authors when they're submitting their work. They also submit some suggested reviewers, right? LTR, Language Teaching Research, had that in the past. I'm not sure if they still do have it. Multilingua, they had it in the past too, which I can remember. A couple of other journals, they had it. When you are submitting your paper, they also ask you to suggest expert authors, which is great actually. As an editor, I appreciate it. In a few cases, I ask the authors via email for suggestions because, again, this is maybe an extreme situation. I've had a few, like maybe 2 authors whose work I sent out to 15 reviewers and none of them agreed to review, like 15 declines. My last resort was to ask the author because the paper looks good and I believe there is promise in the paper, and I emailed the author, can you suggest anyone who could review your manuscript? That's how I try to get more reviewers in two cases I remember. Yeah, so you can put it in the cover letter. I don't think the editors are gonna take it in a wrong way. I wouldn't. I would totally welcome it if somebody suggested some reviewers, and especially when those reviewers are not your former co-authors or your colleagues from the PhD program, right? But also, like, sometimes the reviewers that you suggest, they don't have to be like big names in the field, right? I wouldn't suggest Kanagaraja to review my paper because I know that Suresh is, extremely busy, right? So, like reasonable people or the people that you are suggesting in your paper, I think that's the easiest way, right? To suggest reviewers. Let's say you're submitting to CSOL Journal. your paper is citing authors who recently published in the journal, I would suggest their names as reviewers. And usually if they publish in the journal, they are more willing to review for the journal because it's giving back to the journal, right? The journal publishes their work, and when you ask those authors to review, they are more likely to review for you. And the cover letter, I've got a template that I follow all the time. Like what I do is just explain what the paper is about, and explain how the paper is going to make a contribution to the justify why this journal is a good fit for your paper. That's pretty much it. And say thank you for your time, because editors are not getting paid much either. So say thank you because they spend a lot of time on your paper. I think they would. I always say thank you in my work as an author whenever I write a cover letter, especially as a response to the reviewers, because reviewers, as I said earlier, they're not getting paid. They're doing this for the field, and I always say, thank you for your time, and I really like your suggestions. But yeah, again, Nicole, I have this template which I can share with you guys, but I usually, the way I go is just explain the topic of your paper and explain why your paper is a good fit for this journal. And if you're going to suggest reviewers, be reasonable and suggest the ones that you are citing in your paper, the ones who have already published in the journal that might be, targeted.
And then there is a question from Afsana, an interesting question here, whether AI tools are used as help to review articles.
Not to my knowledge, not in the journal that I'm responsible for. If other journals are using, I'm not aware. We are not using AI tools at all right now. The only tool that we are using is for plagiarism, and it's just that authenticate the name of the application. They check how much of the paper submission is similar to earlier submissions. That other than that, we're not using anything. Yeah.
I'm just going quickly through the questions as well here, because Heather had a question. You mentioned recent references in your presentation. You should include recent references. What does that mean in your opinion? Is that the last 5 years, the last 10 years?
5 to 10, yeah, I would say 5 years. The last 5 years should be in the references. Yeah, make sure it's very, very current.
And there's another question from Nicole here. Nicole has a lot of questions. Great stuff. Sure. When a journal has published a special issue about my topic recently, would you still consider it a target journal? The special issue published just conceptual papers. I would have an empirical paper to publish.
Go for it. Absolutely. Yeah. It does. I mean, it would be easier for the editor to find reviewers. The fact that they published a special issue doesn't mean that they covered everything. They might be still willing to publish a paper. And again, from a publisher perspective, publishers, again, they always want more papers because they are, companies. They want to publish more. They want to make more money, right? Or they want to honor their commitments to the subscribers who are paying the publisher for the journals. But your case is really, a good fit, because if the journal is special issue published all conceptual pieces, your empirical piece will be a really good contribution. Yeah, I would go for that.
Excellent. Another question from Nicole. What should we focus on before uploading a paper, and at which points can we reduce perfectionism?
Yeah, so in terms of APA or that formatting, the journals recently, they said they don't care, but reviewers do care. I mean, even if we tell them not to. So make sure your APA and your MLA, whatever, Chicago, Harvard, whatever, formatting you are following, make sure that it is close to perfect. If you're using Zotero and other tools, make sure that, they do all the work. Perfectionism, I would suggest after you write the paper, before you upload it, ask if your colleagues read it for you, especially someone who's outside your field. That would give you really good, feedback. I remember doing my job talk to civil engineers, right? I'm from applied linguistics, but I wanted to hear civil engineers' opinion about my job talk. It was really good. They gave me a lot of good feedback. So sometimes having someone outside the field read it, inside the field read it. So get some feedback before you upload your paper to the journal. That would just expedite the process and reduce the amount of time and amount of energy you would spend during the review process. Yeah.
Rana had a question. He was first, so please go ahead.
Good morning, Prof.
Morning.
Yeah, mine is about the conversation in a particular topic or a field. Apart from the editorials of the journal and sometimes reading about the scope of the journal, where could I find to be able to know the conversation in the field? Is it only from the editorial of the journal or other places where I could be able to understand the real conversation going on in that particular journal or a topic or a field?
Well, if I'm understanding your question, thank you for the question, Rana. Like there are similar journals, right? Like if you are submitting a journal article to Language and Education, you may also want to browse the related journals.
Okay.
Right? Is that what you're asking, or like if there are recent edited volumes that were published on the topic, I would also browse them. Like I'm studying teacher identity or language teacher identity, and I know that if I'm submitting a paper to any journal in our field, they would expect me to be aware of the special issues that were done on language teacher identity in 3 different journals, right? TESOL Journal, MLJ, and TESOL Quarterly, right? And also there are multiple edited volumes that have been published. So I should be aware of those publications in order to situate my work, my study, and demonstrate my contribution. Am I answering your question, Imran?
Yeah. Sounds good. Thank you for your...
Of course, yeah, absolutely.
Right, and I think Maha was next.
Yes, thank you, Doctor. Just I have one question related to my PhD regarding the methodology. I am from the field of computer engineering, and we didn't follow the qualitative or quantitative. So in this part, what I asked my supervisor about the methodology, how to write the methodology, he told me just you start from, you read the literature review and identify the gap, then you design the protocol, then implement it using simulation tool, then test the method and find the discussion about this study. There's nothing about qualitative or quantitative. It is specific.
So I'm not familiar with your research area, but I'm thinking, so if there is a methodology of the study, whether or not it's quantitative or qualitative, or outside those 2 traditions, the reader would expect you to explain what you did methodologically when you are conducting the study. Let's say, again, this is my completely amateur, let's say you're talking about certain coding in your computer engineering software. Just explain what steps you followed when you are doing the work. I think they expect transparency. They expect to know what you did in the study part of the process in your report.
Okay.
Does it make sense?
Okay. The second question, which I want to know which parts of the paper will attract the reviewer from the beginning to either reject paper or accept it for reviewing.
Yeah. Abstract. So they don't see the rest of the paper when they are making a decision to agree or decline the invitation to review. They only see the abstract. In my case, or in our field, it's always just the abstract.
The last question, if we send the paper for any journal and we didn't receive the response from reviewer for more than, let us say, for more than 6 or 8 months, can we send it to another journal without informing the previous one?
I would inform the previous one. Yeah. So let's say you start with one journal, and as you guys know, you cannot submit your paper to multiple journals at the same time, right? So,
yes.
And you don't do that, I know. So you got your paper, you submit to journal X, and then you wait. Let's say you waited for, even after 3 months, after 3 months in our field, I would email the editors asking about the status of paper, because what happens is the paper is uploaded to the system. The editor is given about 2 or 3 weeks to assign the paper to the reviewers. When the reviewers agree to review, they have a month. And then after everything has been returned, the editor has 2 or 3 weeks to make a decision. So the total, like 1, if you think about like 1 month, 1 month, and 1 month, it would take 3 months for a paper. If everything goes okay with the reviewers and the process, the editor can render a decision on your paper in 3 months. So after 3 months, feel free to email the editors and ask about the status. And if it took like 6 months to hear from the journal in the first round of the review, I would email the editor and tell, or editorial assistant of the journal publisher, tell them that you want to withdraw the paper, and then you move forward to the next journal, your plan B journal. Does it make sense?
Okay, even if I email them and I didn't get any response after 6 months, I can proceed and send it to another journal.
Yes, yeah, you can,
Okay.
unless they have a formal withdrawing process. Does it make sense? Because sometimes, they might have like a withdraw button on their submission system.
Okay.
Right? We're using Scholar One as a submission system where the authors are submitting their work, right? They're uploading their work. If this online portal where you are submitting your work has an option to withdraw your paper, just click on that and then it'll automatically withdraw your paper. If you've done that, if there's no option like this on their webpage or on the online portal, email the editor and the editorial assistant and tell them that and give them your manuscript ID and tell them that you want to withdraw that manuscript from the journal, and then you're fine.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Oh yeah, of course.
So Tran and then Maruf, and then we can be wrapping up.
Yeah, hi. Thank you for the time. So I have 2 questions about like the research methodology. You say that we had to, how to say, it's like the robust, the study design. So can you be more specific about this one? Because one of my papers that have been rejected based on the methodology, and they suggest about the research design. Please.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. So robust is a descriptor that I use to define a well-designed methodology study, right? So it varies from paradigm to paradigm. If you are doing a qualitative study, the definition of robust is different than your quantitative study, right? So whatever your study, let's say you are using narrative inquiry, let's say you are using case study, right? Go back to the literature on case study, right? The methodology textbooks on case study, and make sure that you have followed their recommendations to design a case study.
Yeah.
Right? If you have done this, you are fine.
And the second question is about the data analysis. You say like we have to say how and why. So can you like take the example for the why one? Because how we can, but the why one, please, to be more specific about this one.
Yeah, absolutely. So why part is the part that you explain your justification, right? So let's say in your data analysis, you are using critical discourse analysis. You would need to explain why you chose to use critical discourse analysis, not conversation analysis, not thematic analysis, right? Whatever type of analysis you are choosing to use, make sure that you explain it and why you're using it. Are you approaching the process? Are you approaching whatever topic you have from a critical perspective, and you are looking at the marginalization of certain or representation of certain, minoritized groups? Like, for example, in a recent article, I used critical discourse analysis because we were looking at textbook analysis, right? We were looking at how certain communities are excluded from the language textbooks. Like that worked out well because, from a critical perspective, critical discourse analysis the focus is that, right? The focus is looking at who is not there instead of like who is there. So your data analysis procedures should match your research question and your theoretical framework. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
And you can use a couple of them together. Like, let's say you have an ethnography within a bigger ethnographic study, you can use discourse analysis or critical discourse analysis. It's fine as long as you justify why you do that.
So it's like kind of like we have to link with the research question and the aim of the study, right?
Aim of the study, and also later on the analysis of the data. Why are you analyzing the data that way? Why are you using a certain data analysis procedure?
And the best way to learn it from the, you can have like the tutorial or the mentor paper from the...
Yeah, mentor paper could help to see how another author is making that justification between that analysis and the research questions. But the other thing you may want to do is just go back to your textbooks on methodologies.
Yeah, I got it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Yeah.
And last question, maybe from Maruf.
Thank you so much, Professor. It's a nice learning for us. Actually, to ask one question, I said in the chat board, that is during the final submission of journal, do I submit a journal publication format or just as a MS document format? Because for example, the Elsevier journal, there is some column following their column, and another journal, Taylor or Francis, there is another format. So do I submit just a MS Word document format, or I am preparing with their format?
Yeah, Microsoft Word format works unless they gave some journals provide a template that you are expected to follow. Like, for example, Recall is the one example that I gave earlier. Recall provides a specific template that you follow in your Microsoft Word document, but you don't prepare the PDF for them. You upload the Microsoft Word document.
Okay, that's been MS Word is enough for submission.
Yes, I believe so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, the very little question is that before submission, final submission, do I check the plagiarism check in my full article?
If you have access to one of those plagiarism software programs, you can check it yourself, but you don't have to. The journal would do that for you. Yeah, you don't have to do that unless you want to. The other thing you may need to remember, just each journal has their own formatting issues. Go to the author guidelines and read their guidelines carefully. Sometimes they have different formatting guidelines.
Okay. Just a very little short question is, you are saying in your discussion part, finally we are from the literature review, we are say the similarity or dissimilarity something. And you are saying that it is the very surface level, need to show very specific from my findings with the example. Yeah. So could you clear one more bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So I can give you an example from a recent paper that I collaborated on. We compared teachers from one of the early studies and in our study, right? What did our teachers say or experience, and what did other teachers say or experience in the earlier study? Like making it like a specific example level to the reader to compare. Provide examples from your participants' experiences to juxtapose and compare other participants' experiences from earlier literature. Does it make sense?
Yes. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for this. This was amazing. So many insights in here. I think we've all learned so much from here. So super grateful that you decided to come on, and thanks everybody for attending as well.
Absolutely. I really enjoyed it, guys. Thank you so much for wonderful questions. And you can always email me, and best of luck with your publications and your research. And Marek is an amazing mentor and a guide for you. And I hope you hear good news from your submissions from any journal you go for.
Now, if you've enjoyed this video and you're wondering, how do I get access to these masterclasses? Can I watch them live? They are part of my program, Research Paper Mastery, which is basically designed to help PhD students and researchers just like yourself to regularly publish papers in Scopus-Indexed journals. And we do these masterclasses with experts every single month. And if you're interested in being part of this thriving community of other PhD students and researchers who are publishing in really good journals, then book a free one-to-one consultation, and our expert advisors will discuss with you what your challenges are, what your goals are, to see if Research Paper Mastery might be a good fit for you. And the link to do that is right below this video.